Hey, good morning. Hope you're off to a good start today. Wanted to share with you just a word. Over this past weekend, I have seen, probably as many of you have, that social media just seems to be more and more volatile with conversations and fights that seem to be happening right and left. And it was interesting to me because what was standing out to me was I'd read someone's tweet, but then I would look at the comments that fell below. And I'm hoping the person who wrote it didn't even go back and read those comments, because often, without seeming to even have read the full tweet or understanding what they were saying, people just lit into their part, jumped on the writer, blasted them for everything they were saying, and just jumped on them completely. And it seems like we live in a world right now that just thrives off of that type of animosity towards one another. And too often we as believers get sucked into that too. And it's not just the world that I'm seeing who's tweeting and commenting back and forth. It's believers who are fighting and having these arguments between them. And as I'm about to give up on all of social media and just wondering if we all need to just kind of keep our mouths shut and stay away from each other, I read verse 6 of Colossians chapter 4 this morning. It says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." I believe truly that this is what God would have us to do, not just in our day-to-day life, not just in our workplaces or our families, but also with what we write and post online, that God would have us to speak in this way. And it goes back to verse 5. Paul would say to the Colossians, to the Christians there, he would say, walk in wisdom toward outsiders. He's saying, for those who are not in the faith yet, he said, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. The word time here, it points to an appointed time, a specific season. We find ourselves in a unique time right now. This is a year unlike any we've ever seen before. But we don't know that God might not have us here in this place and in this time and calling us to walk in wisdom and speak in such a way to those around us that we are redeeming this time, that we are making the best use of this season that God has given us. It's not necessarily the one we would have picked or the year we would have chosen, but how is it that we can walk in wisdom to live out the lives that God's called us to live for His glory and to bring the kingdom to the people around us? Paul would say in this context of showing wisdom to others and walking in wisdom to the outside world, those outside of the faith, he would say, let your speech be gracious, to let the gospel of Jesus Christ come out of the very words that you say. And he would say, seasoned with salt. Salt makes a huge difference. A few years ago, I tried to stop putting salt in my eggs to maybe watch my cholesterol a little bit. Eggs already have cholesterol in them, but I was thinking, well, maybe if I lower the salt content, it'll help the cholesterol my body's making, and the salt, the cholesterol that's going on there. And so I stopped eating salt in my eggs for a little while, and I was missing it almost immediately. It was beyond just the mental thought of not having it. But I figured out that I could take just a few little sprinkles, just the tiniest little bit, and sprinkle it on there. And it barely counted for anything when it came to the diet side, but it would make a huge difference. Just that tiniest little bit could make a huge difference in the flavor of the cooked and finished egg. I could sprinkle it on after it was cooked, and it made everything taste so much better. When we season with salt, we notice the distinction. Question for you today to think through is, when people hear you speak, is there anything different about what you're saying? Is the gospel of Jesus Christ making a distinction or a change in the words that you speak? Is it showing through in the way that you're speaking to the people around you? Are you displaying the grace of Jesus Christ and the work that He's done in your heart and your life through the words that you say? It might be a small thing. It may be a simple thing. It may be encouraging someone by saying you're praying for them or asking how you can pray for them. It may be letting people know a little bit of your story in just 15 seconds or so of how Jesus Christ has changed you from the inside out. It might even be having the wisdom to know when you don't need to speak at all, when there's a conversation going on that someone really just needs you to listen. And maybe speaking isn't going to help a situation. And being gracious would lead you to the place where you know exactly what you need to do. And that's what Paul says, that we may always know how we ought to answer each and every person. God's put us in the place of a lot of people each and every day. I want to encourage you to take the words of Paul here from Colossians 4. Early in this chapter, he encourages us to pray about what we say and to think before we speak and to make sure that our words are coming out with the grace and the goodness of Jesus Christ. Let's be those who shine that light and let the words we say make a difference in the lives of those around us. Have a good one.